we're going to open, now we're going to move into...
Yeah, we're going to move into our collaboration now, or how we've come together. In 2016, I had an exhibition at the Ottawa Art Gallery, and Emily was brought in for a conversation. So we had a chance to meet each other for the first time in 2016, and she was asking me questions. Emily prepared questions, and I answered them. So, and Petra at the time several times made a comment, but it was so one-sided. You know, she was asking questions, and you were doing all the talking. And so that kind of stuck with me, Petra. And so when we were invited here, it really is a chance for us to have a dialogue and to have a dialogue with you. So when we came together after September of 2016 for the conversation, we had a meeting to decide, is there something we can do together and what would it be? So one of the things that we found in common, we have many things that are not in common. She's half, I'm twice her age. She has a performance background. I don't go anywhere near performance. So there are all kinds of things. Our art practices are very different, and we embrace those differences. We like that those differences exist, and we want them to continue to exist. So it's not, us coming together was not to break down those differences, but there is like a filter of commonalities that we can put over those differences that allow us to have these incredible conversations. So we met at her studio, and Emily built her studio, and you're going to see it soon. She has images of that here. And so Emily's, so we're in her studio, and she's built this. And it brought back to me oh yes, and I built a house. Oh yeah, and I was your age when I built the house. Oh yeah, because it's so long ago. I am so old. So this the house is actually finished. The house is actually finished. It belongs to my ex. So David and I were working on this, and we had no electricity. We pumped water. It was this is in the, this photo is probably from around 1977. Were you born in 1977? No, I'm just joking. So it was we were very, very optimistic about what we were doing, and we were very optimistic about the future. So he and I bought this 60 acres of land, and we built a house. It's a wood frame, two-story wood frame passive solar design that we designed ourselves, and we built it. I know where every nail is in that house. It's finished now, and my ex has it, so that's fine. And which is why I'm showing you this partial structure, because for me it's like, this is a beautiful image. Anyway.
And where is it, Gail?
It's in Saint-Jean-Mata, which is north, Saint-Jean-Mata is north of Montreal, in the Laurentians. So we'll go through these relatively quickly. We had a huge garden, so I was doing all kinds of back-to-land things like canning and freezing and cooking and growing plants. We had all kinds of plants. We kept bees for a year. And I came across, when I was looking for images to show tonight, I came across these images. That's, so I'll just go back here. And I was very excited by seeing this. This is a piece that I did in my undergraduate years, a long, long time ago. And it's a square piece of plywood with poles, threaded poles, and wood from the forest around the house. And it's a cantilevered, and I'm thinking about things like architecture and whatever. But for me at the time, the thing I remember that is so relevant to what I'm doing now with Emily is that it was about questioning how does culture fit with nature? How do we make them fit so there isn't harm done? And so, of course, I have these things all bolted together, and that was my thing at the time. And it stayed outside. It's outside the house, and it was there until the snow and rain washed it away. I didn't have a name for it. It just was about, for me, it was about trying to find a way to speak about culture and nature in their own distinct ways that could be brought together through a context. So I was doing installation works at the time, but this was a particularly interesting piece for me to find, and you'll see why later on.
Okay, so yeah, this is I call this the rural studio. It's on my friend's land in an undisclosed location, and I go there, and as soon as the weather warms up, I go there. But I've been in relationship to that site for over 6 years now, because I would, even in Montreal, I'd come back in the summer and run a kids art nature themed camp on her land. So it started as a prospector tent, which collapsed. So the second round, you'll see this is the second design, and I made it so that it could not collapse. And it was inspired by, it's like Gothic arch, so you have, it's not an A-frame. You actually maximize a little bit more space inside by having a rounded side. That's inspired by my friend's greenhouse, which is a series of trusses that look like upside down rib cage, and you cover it with tarp. In the first season, I covered it with tarp, white tarp, and just enough to keep the sun out and some light coming in, but not too hot. It didn't warm up like clear plastic. It wasn't an actual greenhouse. And then over the course of the summer, I collected roofing tin, so it was all just a lot of recuperated materials. That's from the first construction in my hand. I'm holding the canvas, so a prospector tent is more like a wall frame tent. And this is the second version, which obviously is a little bit more solid, and it helps to with the snow load. That's inside, and the first thing I did was I painted it with a river on the floor. So yeah, what I think before we start to talk about our residencies, we have basically our presentation from now to the end is a collection of our time in nomadic residency for 2018, and we are always working by a body of water every month, usually for a period of 4 days in a row, outside, usually not necessarily making work together. We go to the site together with our materials, and we create and we have conversations together along the way. And so we've been developing, we're at the very new stages of this project, which we named in December Ensemble Nomad. And so we're going to share some photos of the sites and the works that we've been making. But before I jump into that, I have this quote that really resonated with the two of us, and I think it speaks very much to this moment and to our culture. And I think a little bit of a little bit of background as to where we come from in terms of why we work. So this is a quote by Francis Weller. The two primary sins of Western civilization, amnesia and anesthesia, we forget and we go numb. When we forget, we're able to do untold damage to our watersheds, to one another, and to the entire earth. We live in a society with little regard for matters of the soul. We have substituted a strange, frenzied obsession with earning a living, one of the most obscene phrases in our world, for the vital and fragrant life of the soul. We have sadly turned the ritual of life into the routine of existence. We have forgotten the primary language of grief. As a consequence, the terrain of sorrow has become unfamiliar and estranged, leaving us confused, frightened, and lost when grief comes near. When our grief cannot be spoken, it falls into shadow and re-arises in us as symptoms. We struggle with addictions and find ourselves moving at a breathless pace, trying to keep up with the machinery of culture. Our need to be anesthetized, I can never say this word, anesthetized, is rooted in our smoldering dissatisfaction with meager existence we have been offered by this society, itself a profound source of grief. Our soul knows we are designed for a bigger, more sensuous, and more imaginative life. But we go for days, weeks, months, a lifetime with only marginal encounters with beauty and the wild, only sharing an intimate moment with a friend. We collide in the numbing as well, slipping into the void through alcohol, drugs, shopping, television, and work, anything to help us ward off the feelings of emptiness that come crashing at our door. We are not meant to live shallow lives, pocked by meaningless routines and the secondary satisfactions of happy hour. We are the inheritors of an amazing lineage, rippling with memories of life lived intimately with bison and gazelle, raven in the night sky. We are designed to encounter life with amazement and wonder, not resignation and endurance. This is the very heart of our grief and sorrow. The dream of a full-throated living, woven into our very being, has often been forgotten and neglected, replaced by a societal fiction of productivity and material gain. No wonder we seek distractions. Every sorrow we carry extends from the absence of what we require to stay engaged in this one wild and precious life. And every sorrow is made more difficult to metabolize by that absence. Grief work offers us a trail leading back to the vitality that is our birthright. When we fully honor our many losses, our lives become more fully able to embody the wild joy that aches to leap from our hearts into the shimmering world. Frances Weller.
Weller, and what's
The Wild Edge of Sorrow is the name of the book.
is she related to Mary Oliver? She quoted
It's a
Mary Oliver.
It's a he.
He.
Francis
Oh,
is a
Francis is a he. Okay, he quoted one of her phrases.
One of the things that I like so much in that quote. This is something that she brought to the conversation we had at her studio that day when we first were looking at possibilities, and we talked a lot about grief, and it's not about what we're doing is not about grief, it's about pleasure. So there's an irony in all of this, but in fact the sentence that really resonated for me was when he says that human beings, we are not meant to lead shallow lives. And I think that is exactly the impetus I needed to go, oh yes, okay, we're going to change some shit here. So, yeah, it's a profound quote. And we're trying, in our residencies, we're trying very, very hard to listen closely, to look, to listen to the biodiversity that we find around us. We're seeking places that are both urban and path. At Farrellton is quite beautiful, the butterflies and all kinds of wonderful insects. And the idea is not to set goals, and the idea is not to set limits on what we're doing, but that to go there as artists and to try to listen closely and hopefully bring something to a visual representation that really we understand can't be represented. Translating. So we're translating. Yeah. So we're very new at this. We're very new at working together. This was our first residency at the end of July of last year, 2018. This is Pat in Farrellton. It's an old school that has been turned into artist studios, and
Along the 105 next to the Gatineau River.
yes, next to the Gatineau River. That's right, absolutely. We spent 4 days there. They were absolutely wonderful days. It was an excellent place to start because we had quiet and access to a toilet.
And sinks for water.
And sinks for water. Yeah. This is a piece, this was day one for me at PAF. I had a 50-foot roll of paper that I put into a tire rut. I have two major avenues of discovery in my work, of questioning in my work, and one of them is, as I stated already, how can human beings live in nature, which is part of us, and we're part of nature, obviously, and how can we do this with harmony? And at the same time, okay, that's something else. So this is a 50-foot roll of paper that has been, I put a line down the middle, line being my other love. I love lines. And then took charcoal and different things and just made a tracing of the pebbles and the stones that were under the paper. And I felt that this was a way that I could interpret that particular place on that particular day at that particular moment. And behind PAF is a disused playground, and these old tires were quite fun. I did place a fake flower there. The fake flowers come back. And then made some rubbings from and then developed them into drawings from those tires. I made rubbings from the building. And in the playground, set up some different ideas, just really playing in the playground. Do you want to go?
Okay.
Yeah, here's
So I made a raft, and I brought the raft with me to the river, and I started each day on the water, usually doing drawings or reading, listening to my radio, which Gail didn't appreciate so much. I'm more of
It's true.
you prefer silence. I like a little bit of noise in the background, and what was interesting about this particular spot on the water was the echo from the highway was super loud, and a lot of these trucks are logging trucks and carrying resources from north to south. It's like a big umbilical cord. So it's basically two pieces, a piece of plywood and thick styrofoam and strapping. So I would strap my plywood to the styrofoam and float on that for the morning part of the day. So there's some some cedar tiles, and then I'm drawing on the cedar tiles, and then I did some prints of plants, like aquatic plants and shoreline trees. So I'm doing lino cuts with cedar and willow and some seaweed that I don't know the name of, but I really love the fine lines.
You were still tethered to the shore, though.
Yeah, I was still tethered to the shore. Otherwise, I would have gone downstream for sure. So there's a collection of some of the work. And then again, just following the obsessive preoccupation with line, and staying in that place of comfort as well. Like, I was aware that I was repeating a lot of those lines that had been with me in the past 2 years producing that show at the Mississippi Valley Textile Museum, and I still question, I'm like, when am I going to move away from the maps? And so it still keeps coming. Again, it came through here with old maps from Brooklyn to the Gatineau Park that I had kept because I love keeping maps, and so I'd pull these ones out, and I mean, obviously it's not a great print, but I didn't have the right tools, so I did what I could, and I printed my lino cuts onto some of these maps of my favorite places. There's a day trip map, which has like really vague instructions: put in at ramp, leave bike at Bouchette Beach, bike back at end of paddle to car at Paul's Beach. So this was like a light rapids route that you can put in at Lac Home and go through a couple of light rapids and then make your way back through a couple of channels back down to the Gatineau River and do like this beautiful loop in almost half a day. Like, it's a really special place. So the beach was a public beach right at the base of the Bouchette Bridge, which is just south of Maniwaki. So that's the story behind that map. And I have 2 really beautiful days of that time on the water that I think about when I look at that map. This is a tracing of a cedar tree shadow with sugar. And this was part of the result of sitting under a cedar tree for 4 days. I was like really loving this tree and the shade that this tree offered, and watching the afternoon sun change. We were lucky to have sun. There was no rain really. And so this, within minutes, this contour changed. And that was sugar. I didn't even plan it. I borrowed some sugar from the kitchen in the building because I didn't have any powder to put down.
Did ants show up?
Well, I thought they would, but I didn't see any. But I also didn't hang around for the days after. There's a piece that's basically egg yolk and earth-based pigment and charcoal. And I'm not sure what the wash is doing. I think it's because I left it in the rain, and it's some of the residue of the egg yolk coming to the surface. So again, it's just playing with materials. Again, that's from an actual rendition of a map. Further up the line, closer to Lac du Poisson Blanc, north of Kazabazoa, and that's just white ink with black ink and white ink. I was thinking about dominoes, lineage. I was thinking about family. I was thinking about patterns. I was thinking about the individual. I was thinking about the collective. I was doing a lot of, I guess, healing work with my mother's line, and started drawing on these dominoes that turned into a map. And I was doing videos, like this idea of the person at the end of the line. All they have to do is step out of the way to not be in that momentum of the history that lies behind them. This is our table. There's the dominoes pieced together, and they live in two little boxes. I like that they can be packaged up and brought places. They're very lightweight.
So it actually is a puzzle.
Yeah, kind of like a puzzle. And you could flip them around and play dominoes
Yeah.
as well, with the numbers on the back. And that's just white ink. This is our second one. Do you want to open up about that?
That's the Hilton Hotel in the back at Lac Limy. Lac Limy was a completely different experience for us. It's very urban. Cyclists and children and old people do their exercises there, and there are always people around. So unlike PAF, where we were really on our own, this was a very urban space, and so it was interesting that way. One of the things I'd like to say about the residencies that we're doing and why we're doing them is really about the interruption that it presents to, well, certainly for me, I'll speak for myself, the interruption that it presents to my own practice. I'm a studio-based artist, and I work very well in the solitude of my studio, but it's not enough. I need to be connected. We all do, obviously. So the residencies are about finding dissonance. It's about finding noise, and this certainly was a place where we found noise. So
there's the highway. The
highway
50. There's the casino. The casino tower.
So these are yours. So why don't you
start?
I'm not sure.
Here, you talk about yours.
Talk about mine. Okay. So I wasn't sure what to do here because I was really out of my element, which was what I was looking for. But then you're out of your element, so it's not comfortable. And I wasn't sure how to react. And basically, I just started looking at the ground. So I think this is day one, if I'm not mistaken. And goose shit was everywhere. There's always a lot of goose shit at Lac Limy for some reason. There are a lot of geese. And so these elements of humans having been there and of animals having been there, these were everywhere. So this is in August, and the greens were very different from the greens at PAF. I just started working with some gesso and watercolor, and just I didn't. This is the way I found it. I framed the photo, obviously, but I didn't place those things so that it could be a nice photo. It just really is the way I found things. And so I went around looking for things to find, and I did find things. So I found some tree bark and some more tree bark. That's oak, I think, and the other one is tree bark. And then there's my fake flowers, which I had put in the playground at PAF, and here they're in a playground at Lac Limy. So I bought a square pipe, and the price tags are on everything because that's important to what I want to say about it. That when we put ourselves into nature, we create these spaces, but everything is at a price, and so. The politics for me of leaving the price tags on, or of just making like flowers out of balls of plastic are really that's all that this work is about. a stick with some yarn and fake flowers at the top. That's like luckily me at the back.
And I think you've referred to it as more explorations than work.
They're
right?
absolutely explorations. I don't feel that I've produced any work really, and I'm not sure that I want to. It's not. I'm not. For me, it's about the challenge of being there,
Mhm.
of listening closely, of sharing this with Emily. It's about getting out of my routine and the pleasure of being in nature, whether it's an urban nature or whether it's a more savage, more raw nature. Yeah, I don't know. Are there any questions? We're doing all the talking here.
Talk about it as a residency.
Yeah.
Is it you go there during the day, or
First of all,
it's a
yes,
resident?
self-directed nomadic residencies is how we're terming it. Yes, because we're setting them up, we're making all the rules, we're deciding where we go, but we're two busy people, so you also have to find time where two busy people can have 4 or 5 days or a week together, and that's the purpose of it. I mean, that's why we're doing it. So the idea is to experience as many different kinds of residencies, of times together, of meeting places, of gatherings that we can in a season. Lac Les is really special because now with the flooding that's happened this year, we started this week actually.
We're going back tomorrow.
Yes, we're going back tomorrow to Lac Les, where the water, the lines and all of the garbage cans and
Oh, it's
the
totally
trees,
transformed.
the water where the picnic tables that we set up at last year were totally underwater. They weren't visible. So it's and so now there's a film on everything and there's a smell because the Lac Les is the Gatineau River. It's the Gatineau River water. It feeds directly from the river. So as the river was rising, so was Lac Les, and it went up and up and up. So the space and the feeling and the smells, everything is very different. We went on Monday, and there was no one there because we were walking through puddles of muck, but there were herons and geese, lots of geese. Ducks, and there were ducks and lots of birds. But there wasn't a lot of animal life, and there was no one else. We were the only ones there. But we left after a few hours because we couldn't sit anywhere. Everything was so filthy
And wet.
and wet. Yeah, everything was so wet. On Tuesday, we went back on Tuesday morning, and the water had dried up in the parking lot. We were able to pull up cars, and I found a picnic table that had been every bit higher, so the seat was mucky, but the top of the table was fine. There were people everywhere. There were cyclists and kids and birds, and no herons. The herons had gone. So it's just it's small, but it's meaningful. It's meaningful to us.
But it seems also that it's a process of self-discovery, because strangely there are very subtle connections between your interests and what nature seems to be bringing out. You know, it's very interesting. And well, just from what I'm seeing and just listening to what you're saying,
Yes.
it is there are different dimensions to the practice. You're both very different
Very
people,
different, yeah.
but it seems to me that you're discovering more about your potential as artists.
Well, that's what
And
we're searching for,
interests.
yes. Individually, but also
Yes.
together.
Yes.
And
And it's coming together in a very subtle way.
I hope so, because I can't see it.
Well, we're also at the very beginning.
We're at the very beginning of this, yeah. We're at
So-
the very
Did you
beginning.
say you started this a year ago, or you're back after a year?
Yes.
So
You've done it for a year
yeah, this was our second residency
Well, we did
in
4.
2018.
We do it it's seasonal. This is seasonal work,
Oh, okay.
right? We're not going to be doing this in the wintertime because we want to be outside. Well, we might. I mean, I don't know, but we
Unless-
we
now. How
did
many
last
years
year.
will it last?
Maybe 5.
No, it's a multi-year project. We'll see where it takes us.
We do have a goal of an event. We would like to produce work that's more developed. We've talked about collaborating with an event, like a curator, to produce a book and an eventual show, but we're not there yet. We're just we're still in the beginning stages, the early stages
We're in,
of
we're in
production.
conversation with an architect, and our long residency, we went to Gibraltar Point at Toronto Island. Those slides are coming up, but in the late fall. So the intention is to bring others in to what we're doing, as a disruption, as a way of stirring things up, of not allowing things to settle and be familiar. Because someone who isn't an artist or someone who is an artist is going to, if they came into if they come into this project, would change it completely. So we need to continue to be open-minded and leave the defense barriers down, and that's the practice that we're in at this moment. And trying to make our thank you Rosalie for your comment, because we don't see commonalities right now, but we're hoping.
Well, philosophically, I think we're there.
Philosophically, yes.
Because we could talk about capitalism, we could talk about
Yeah.
what we're doing. We're slowing time down, and we're doing the opposite of production. I mean, we're doing production, but we're doing more relationship than we're doing production. So, and you know, these are not billable hours. We're you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, well.
They good laughing.
So-
Some elements of meditation.
yes, yes.
Quite the ask for your office.
But no, it's partly, we talked about that grief quote, you know, and this frenzy, the mechanization of culture, this running from our reality is what's gotten us into this mess. And so this process of slowing down and listening to the landscape, listening to ourselves, being in conversation, those are
How do you,
important.
so where do you see the role, like when you're making, are you thinking aesthetically? Or are you trying not to see aesthetically?
It doesn't matter. No, it's not an objective.
Well, I
It's not an
do.
objective.
But how do you decide which picture to take?
Well, it's interesting.
I'm just wondering, like,
Yeah.
how you see that relationship
Oh.
between choosing and allowing
Mm-hmm.
something that you don't control.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember it's more for me, it's the feeling that happens where I'm like, I'm just taken by this wave of like, what a special spot. Sometimes I will or will not take a photo, but I remember this is from the bog, and that very specific moment after the tornado, we had a plan to go to Pink Lake in the Gatineau Park, and the trails were closed off because of all the damage, and so we changed the plan. We go to Blue Sea Lake, like the Map Bleu, the bog trail, and it was just really, the emotions were really raw, and then combined with that landscape at that time of the year when all of the vegetation was starting to die and all the geese were flying, there was something about this pathway in the water that,
And even the land seems to shift there.
yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem
Yeah.
stable.
no. It's, so, I don't know if that answers your question, but there's like the feeling,
No, it doesn't
sometimes the
answer.
feeling affects the choice. That's not answering your question, is it?
Well, it struck me when I was particularly looking at Gail's pieces, the very deliberate photography
Yes.
of those pieces, and then just.
Well, that's
and
because I didn't know what to do. Yeah. I was just
But
trying
you're
to find a
still
starting
able
point.
to make a choice and take a picture
Well,
and
I
show
work
us.
from my head. I mean, my work, my drawing is, I do that with my head first. It's an emotion that I turn, it's an emotion, I have an emotional reaction to something that I then intellectualize so that I can do something with it. And so my work, my drawing in my studio is conceptual work. I'm working with a concept. And I'm trying to get stuff out of me. It's like the work that I do in my studio, I'm trying to get rid of my grief. I'm trying to get rid of my anger. I'm trying to get rid of the things because that's what I do. Because I'm an artist, I guess. But that's one of the interruptions that's happened with Emily, because she doesn't work that way, and she doesn't work from her intellect, and I do, and so I don't know. I can't answer your question really, but my intellect will always be there because that's who I am. I mean, I'm really old, so I can't change.
So this is Map Bleu.
You're changed right now.
Yeah, I am. Well, that's the objective, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just have a question. Just because the quote is really, the spirit of that quote is in my head too. But is it just that you show, like, is the first thing is just showing up in the space?
Yeah.
And it's just because you happen to be artists that you end up then making an aesthetic response? Or,
Well, I don't know if it's an aesthetic response. I think they're, to some extent, they're emotional responses. I'm not, when I was in the playground and made the rubbings, that's, I mean, I don't know. Are they aesthetic responses?
well, just because you're making choices, right? You're making choices with art
Yeah,
material.
but I made a choice to get up and be there for 9 o'clock. You know, it's like we make choices all the time. There's no, I have to, there's something, I think my response to each of you would be the same, and that is that for me this is not romantic.
Yeah.
I don't see nature or myself in a romantic way. I don't
Yeah.
see what we're doing in a romantic way.
No.
For me, this is nature is not good and we're bad. Humans are bad. Humans are good. Nature's bad. I don't have any of that baggage. For me, it's really about understanding how I fit in and trying to do something with that. Trying to find at what point in the day and the moment I fit in with nature. Where do I fit? Who am I? And so they're really basic questions. And
It's also very subversive.
thank you.
Because, because I mean, we are so trained not to ask those questions now,
Well,
right?
that's right,
I
exactly.
mean, it's I just spent an afternoon supposedly going to this positive communications workshop or whatever, and I still can't get my head wrapped around it. But yeah, all the choices that were made in that quote, all the choices that through this process, and the not romanticizing of it is very subversive because it becomes raw and unprocessed.
One of that's the, if there is an objective, that's the objective.
Okay.
One of the things that Emily and I have always talked about over the 2 years we've known each other is slowing down. And that's subjective, that's subversive, that just slowing down, breathing, trying to breathe more slowly, looking, listening. In Western culture, we don't do any of that. We speed up because we're going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And so leaving that behind is a practice, has to be practiced.
That's
So
more
th-
Western
th-
reflections.
that's the way in which it's also not a romantic. It's not romantic what we're doing.
Mhm.
It's really very political.
It's not escapist. We're
it's
doing
not
this to
escapist.
No, it's
confront
understood,
that
yeah.
part that's buried
Yeah.
by this acceleration.
Mhm.
You know.
That's why I did my very long drawings.
Yes. We talked about that actually.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the boardwalk. This is
That's
the
my
moss.
friend Emily. She's got all her gear. Do you know what she did that day? I have to tell them. You know what she did that day? She went out on the boardwalk and didn't come back. She found a bench for sitting,
Oh yeah.
and she occupied the bench. She sat on so it was wonderful. So she was in
It
the sun
was-
doing
it
drawings.
was
Yeah,
wonderful.
really wonderful. So she's out to find her bench.
And it's very acid, the soil there. So the trees are dwarf. There's Labrador trees. There's tamarack trees.
And beautiful colors. Oh, beautiful colors. We were there in September.
It was September. It was right after the tornado. So this is what you made.
Yes, I made that, yeah. That's merely. Or a rendition of,
This.
and that too. Just a combination.
Is that a
of-
watercolor?
It's watercolor, yeah.
This.
That is white gesso and charcoal. It's just, it is what it is. It's an abstract, very uncontrolled, very unthought through, just doing it.
So it's not even really plein air, then, it's sort of,
No.
you're there and.
It's definitely not.
No, but I would look at this. I would never make that in my studio. I would never know how to do it. I'm trying. There's
Yeah, but
a,
you're being influenced by being in
Yes.
that environment.
that's
It's
right,
the
exactly.
translation. That's what we're trying to do. It's
Yeah.
very messy. I feel like we're at the very beginning, raw stage of like not knowing quite what this language is, but it is a language.
But there's
It is
a
a-
It's a language that's not really spoken
Yeah.
or known. And we talk about the translation of these experiences into work, but part of it is you can't develop that language without having a relationship.
It's a transformation, which
Yes.
I see.
But it's in relationship.
Yes.
It's in relationship. The term, when we were in Toronto last December, we decided to name our collective, our coming together, and we decided on the word ensemble because it means that it's all of the parts create the whole. So we are being there, we're there, and nature's there. We're there with each other. We have our. Maybe this answers your question. That is really on est ensemble. It's really we're in all of the parts, where we are, who we are, the moment of the day, if it's raining, whatever.
Each part is considered in relation to the whole.
Each part is considered in relation to the whole.
And nomad, we kind of wrote this, but it's very connected to the definition of nomad, but nomad with an E, because it refers back to the feminine. We work seasonally and move from place to place to find pasture and food. We learn how to live in this bioregion in right relation. Our time in the natural world provides us with the feeling of connection to the whole. We feed our creativity and build a body of knowledge through our experience with the more than human world. The artworks are intrinsic to our wandering, which makes something visible from that which cannot be seen. So there's so much feeling that is captured in this particular photo for me that I can't begin to address with language. The maps for me came out. I was working on drawing paper, acrylic paper with black gesso, and doing experiments with white pencil and white ink. And these were all, I call them my downloads because they're not referring to any maps, they're just coming out automatically. And then I figure out how I'm going to piece them together after. So there's no plan. It's really one tile at a time. So for me, it's just following that process and seeing where it leads. And then a lot of the repetition is something that attracts me as well, that I find comfort in. There's the sky on our first day. And this brings us to our last residency in Toronto Island in December. Artscape Gibraltar Point. This is a view of the outside building. And this is our view from inside the studio.
We knew we were in Toronto.
And something very special about that place in the winter is that in the summer it's filled with tourists. In the winter there's limited ferries and it's empty. It's really beautiful to walk along the beach out back and face Lake Ontario and its expanse. In the middle of this urban metropolis. This is the studio.
Yeah, talk about these in the front, Emily.
Well, I'm a bit of a magpie, so one of the first things that I did on the walks, I would just pick up things on my walks, and then I found all these little papers there that were perfect little rectangle square, white pieces that I would place the objects onto, and it was just a collection that grew over the 7 days that we were there, and I did a photo series of them. Just to connect to the just the vibrancy of object, of matter, of sometimes there's just a life that comes through them that I'm attracted to, that I can't resist.
Do you keep them or do you put them back?
I put them back, but I did keep them for my stay at the studio, and I archived them, and then I put them back. So this is some of Gail's works in progress.
That was the wall I was using. So I was going out into the building. It was very cold. It was in December, a week before Christmas. We were there the week before Christmas last year. It was very cold and rainy. So we did some work inside, and I was doing rubbings again. I had one table there. I'm at the table on the extreme right, and Emily had the table in the middle and some of her tiles in the background. It was a huge studio. It was really nice. We were lucky to have such a large space. It's one of Emily's photos. there she's working large scale.
It was amazing to work in such a large space.
Yeah, it was really good. Could
It was
actually
about
get that
10
paper
foot.
on the wall.
10 foot long.
Yeah.
There's the water plant, the water processing plant. They process the water for
Yeah.
the island of for Toronto.
For all of
On the
Toronto gets
island.
their water from this processing plant. Yeah,
Have
there
the-
is a
Have the water risen up there?
yeah.
For the
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's really bad erosion.
I can't speak to the floods at this moment. I know that Lake Ontario has been affected, but I don't know what that site is like at the moment.
Well, I've seen pictures where it's getting up there. I don't know whether it's affected the buildings yet, but.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So these are some of the stills of the pictures, the objects that I had found. And again, like, they all have so much information in them, and memory and stories. I wonder where they've been. There's the interconnected play. Again, each time I arrange them, it's always taking a different shape, a different composition. So there's something I like about the smallness of them. They can be collected and put into an envelope, and then brought to a location and spread out in a completely different fashion.
I like taking notes and writing. It's diaristic type writing. What I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what I saw. And that's Lake. That's the lake. I've worked in black and white for many years now. Since 2010, I've been working primarily in black and white, and more recently, I'm back to using color. But the color has to indicate something specific for me, and so this is just the lake water.
Well, one of the loudest things for me when I first saw this picture, I was like, wow, you've really captured the color
it
and
was
the
radiant.
feeling of this place. Because the color, the way the color came out, that was where we were.
Yeah, nice.
The ripples at the top look like the clouds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that squash at the top. It also looks like an eye, I was remembering after. It really looks like an eye, so I thought that was kind of neat. Some of those rubbing of the hall and some furniture stuck in the hall. So this is graphite and watercolor or gouache or something. Here's the using man-made metals that are obviously manufactured poles again, and I placed them around in different places. On the island is the Island Public and Natural Science School. It was originally, I think, or there was a school originally which now houses Gibraltar Point. It was a grade school at one point for many years.
Yeah,
Did you?
I grew up
You're
in Toronto,
kidding?
and
Oh.
we did a week at the island school. It
Oh,
was
wow.
like 5 or
Nice.
6, yeah.
Oh,
Nice.
cool.
Very nice, yeah. But we learned when we were there that the children were moved out of the school, and there were no longer any classes there because there's a chance that the erosion is so bad. There's a chance that Gibraltar Point is going to go into the lake. So it's okay for artists to be there, but kids can't be.
Well, they
This
had
is-
they had experienced a big flood last year,
Yeah.
and one of the people who rents a studio there's artists, like resident artists, had talked about kayaking around the building,
Yeah.
right around the building. Like the water was that high.
So
So the
this year it
future of
must have
this
been, yeah.
future of this site is a bit.
There were signs
Precarious.
all over the lakeside of the island about the conservation that's being undertaken. It's begun. It's a major undertaking to preserve the island because it's literally being washed away. So if you go further along, we don't have.
I think it has something to do with Leslie Spit,
Yes,
the
yeah,
man-made
yeah.
peninsula, but I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to get the facts wrong. I think it has something to do with the man-made
The island
structure.
kids who are studying at the Island Public School would be out for a science lesson, I guess, on the beach, and they made these most beautiful little installation works. And so I waited till they were gone, and then I went and added my 2 cents.
Or $2.
There's a price for this, yeah. These are just some photos. I thought that looked a lot like a drawing I had done at PAF. And my love of line, man-made and nature. And this kind of structure going out into the lake. You can see how what the erosion is. Just you know, it happens on a daily basis. The water's just taking everything away. So there was a structure. You can see further out. There was a building there at some point, and there no longer is. Emily was finding little things on the beach. I found this bundle of copper wire one morning. I went out and it was just had been washed up on the beach. This huge bundle of beautiful copper wire. And this, I was thinking of when I saw this, I was walking on the road on the island, and I came across this line across there. I was thinking of my 50-foot paper in the tire rut, and I thought, yeah, this is great. Someone knows what I'm up to. Great, look at that. Yeah.
That's our last morning. One of the things that I would do every morning was go and watch the sunrise on the water. And a thread that I realized as I was putting this slideshow together, a thread going back to the Rowork project in Montreal was the personhood of place, like relating to the non-human world as a friend. And that's something that really carried me through that 4-year, multi-year land art project in Montreal. That's the thing that gave me energy, was keeping this in mind, was going. Every time I would go and put all this energy and volunteer hours in, every time I would pull people out for the weeding parties and the garbage cleanups and the municipal meetings, I was working for my friend. It was like, I referred to this once to someone as if the field was my friend who, let's say, was dying of cancer. And I did not know if they would survive or not. But I knew that I had to just keep showing up and being in relation and celebrating them, whether or not their life would be finite. And so because I wasn't attached to the outcome, it really brought me in direct relationship to what I had in that particular moment with my relationship with that place and the relationships that were being built around it at that time. And so the relationship with the water that's been a more recent one is, how can I relate to this living force as friend? What information is coming through me? How is this changing my work? How is this changing my being? And so watching being out there every morning got me attached. And I left. This was my last day, and it was hard for me to leave. It was that was 7 days, and it's a very small window of time. But it was hard to leave because I got attached. And I think that idea that comes back around what's the word? Stewardship work, or whatever you want to call it. It happens through the senses, and it happens with visiting a place over and over through a period of time, developing a relationship. It's not through petitions, it's not through these abstract concepts. It's through the feet, it's through the hands, it's through the relationships and the memories that come through those moments. So memory and emotion is a part of what propels this work. And maybe we could leave it